It was not the apostles' object to convince them in particular that they were sinners. Besides, neither the philosophers nor magistrates nor any of the heathens occupied themselves in judging others respecting their religious worship and ceremonies. Such observances, as well as their moral effects on those by whom they were practiced, appeared to the sages of Greece and Rome a matter of perfect indifference. The Jews, on the contrary, had learned from their law to judge, to condemn, and to abhor all other religions, to keep themselves at the greatest distance from those who profess them, and to regard all idolaters as under the wrath of God. The man, then, who judges others, to whom, by a figure of speech, Paul addresses his discourse in the first verse, is the same to whom he continues to speak in the rest of the chapter, and whom he names in the 17th verse. Behold, thou art called a Jew. Verse 1, Therefore thou art inexcusable, O man, whosoever thou art that judgest, for wherein thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself, for thou that judgest doest the same things. Therefore, this particle introduces a conclusion not from anything in the preceding chapter, but to establish a truth from what follows. The apostle had proved the guilt of the Gentiles, who, since they had a revelation vouchsafed to them in the works of God, though they did not possess his word, were inexcusable. The Jews, who had his word, yet practiced the same things for which the former were condemned, must therefore also be inexcusable. In the sequel, he specifies and unfolds the charge thus generally preferred. O man. This is a manner of addressing betokening his earnestness, which Paul frequently employs, as in the 9th chapter of this epistle. Whosoever thou art that judgest. The apostle here refers to the judgment which the Jews passed on the Gentiles. It is generally explained as if he was finding fault with those whom he addressed, and declaring they were inexcusable because they judged others. But this is erroneous. What he censures is not their judging, but their doing the same things with those whom they condemned. The character of the Jews which distinguished them from the Gentiles was that they judged others. God had conferred on them this distinction when he manifested his covenant to them, to the exclusion of all the other nations of the world. This character of judging, then, can belong only to the Jews, who, according to a principle of their religion, condemned the other nations of the earth and regarded them as strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. In this manner the Jews were seated as on a tribunal, from which they pronounced judgment on all other men. Paul then had good reason for apostrophizing the Jew as thou that judgest. But as there also were distinctions among the Jews themselves, and as the priests, the scribes, and chiefly the Pharisees were regarded as more holy than others, he says, whosoever thou art, thus not excepting even one of them. Thou art inexcusable. Paul intended to bring in all men guilty before God, as appears by what he says in the 19th verse of the 3rd chapter, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before God. He had already proved the inexcusableness of the Gentiles, and here he proceeds to do the same respecting the Jews, whom he addresses directly, and not in a manner only implying that he refers to them as is supposed by Professors Tholick and Stewart. Mr. Stewart especially endeavors to show that in the first part of this chapter Paul does not proceed at once to address the Jews, but first, he says, quote, prepares the way by illustrating and enforcing the general proposition that all who have a knowledge of what is right and approve of it, but yet sin against it, are guilty, unquote. This view of the passage is equally erroneous with that of those who suppose that the apostle is addressing the philosophers and magistrates. Both these interpretations lead away from the true meaning of the several parts of the chapter, through the whole of which the address to the Jew is direct and exclusive. The apostle's object was to conduct men to the grace of the gospel, and so to be justified in the way of pardon and acquittance.